Welcome to Sabes que Did You Know here at Usala Media. I'm your host, Jessie Bermudez, and my co-host is none other than the international renowned percussionist, Pablo Baptista. Hey,
Hey,
Pablo, how's it going?
it's going great, Jesse. I'm trying to slow down in between our conversations, but I'm super excited to be here. I'm really happy that you have me as your co-host for Sabes que. We're trying to get into some in-depth information about some of the most greatest Latin artists and artists in the music industry. And so we're doing some interviews, but before we got started, I mentioned to Jesse, I thought it would be important for us to talk about each other and celebrate your career, Jesse, as my friend and mentor for many years. We've been friends. You started this organization entitled La Asociación de Músicos Latinoamericanos, which I was a Temple student when I started working there teaching percussion. But even before then, Jesse, I wanted to just start off by saying thank you, and it's been such an honor to know you and be a friend of yours for well over 30 years. And we've taught a lot of children together and done a lot of great things together. But I want the world to know some more about you, Jesse. How you got started, your background, chronologically, and how it all came from, going to the military, coming back to Philadelphia, and starting your crusade to help Latin musicians in Philadelphia. So I thank you. I love you. You're a dear friend, and so tell the whole world, like, who is Jesse Bermudez, and and what did you do, and how did you create this amazing organization of AMLA and all the things you've done? So
Well, Pablo, I'm really humbled by your kind words and the fact that you want to focus on the things that I have been doing throughout my life, and certainly I'm going to focus on the things that you've been doing in your life, because we both kind of like in parallel. I'm doing this and you're doing that, but we're both, with the grace of God, we're growing in many of the things that we did. Now, when you ask me about, a little bit of background on myself and what I was doing and how I got to do what I do with Latin music, well, first of all, I was a DJ from the beginning. After I got out of the military, I was always involved in music because my father played guitar and my mother played guitar too.
oh,
So there was music in my house, but it was Latino music, Spanish music, as they used to say back in the day. But I came from an African American neighborhood. So while, the Latino thing was in the house, on the outside, I was on the R&B scene. And I wound up, doing doo-wop, because in the 50s, that was doo-wop groups, and everybody in every neighborhood or gang or whatever it was, they all had a doo-wop group, and I was certainly one of them. So it was a mixture of two different things for me. And of course, I went into the military, and because I had been into the doo-wop thing all throughout my military career, wherever I got stationed, I wound up putting together a singing group. And so that was a lot of fun. But and then
Jesse,
when I came
Jesse,
back, of course, I got married, had some kids, and wonderful kids. And
hey Jesse.
I continued to like the music because, believe it or not, Pablo, I was like producing or working with groups like Breakwater and stuff, because I had become a DJ and I joined this group that had other DJs. They were called Allegheny 7, and I learned how to DJ from this guy that was in the group. His name was Chocolate City Smitty, and then there was a Disco Joe, and so I got to learn how to do the thing. But then I also decided that I would be playing Latin music with the DJ music. So wherever I had a chance, for instance, I give you an example. I give you an example. Ain't No Stopping Us Now. Well, there was a great version of it in Spanish. So I would play it in English, and then the next thing you know, I'd play the Spanish version, and I would get, great response to it. And so anyway, one thing led to another. I kept doing my DJ thing, and then of course, one of the biggest gigs that I did back then was actually the Salsa con Salsa concert in 1978, where 5,500 people attended the Civic Center there.
Hold on. Testing. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I just I had a couple of questions for you, and
Go ahead.
I wasn't sure if I was muted. But so you went to the military. Which branch of the military did you?
I was a Navy. They had the best food, but believe it or not, it wasn't a fun experience for people of color in the Navy at that time. And when I went in, they had just given people of color the opportunity to do something else in the Navy besides wait on the officers or be a cook. So I took that opportunity, but I wound up in the fire room, which was okay. That was better than being a cook or waiting on the officers. So anyway, that's a little portion of my military experience.
What year did you come back?
59 and got out in 64.
Okay, 64. Wow.
I was there for a couple of years.
Yeah, so you came back to Philadelphia afterwards then?
Oh yeah, definitely. Philly was always my home. Even though I've been to a lot of different places, Philly's always been outside of where I'm at now.
So now you come home from the military. What happens to Jesse Bermudez then, the young Jesse Bermudez? What happens after?
Well, I got married and had 4 beautiful children. Okay. So that's what happened to me. And of course, pursuing a living for my family, I wound up in the printing business. I wound up actually, it's a great story. For me, it's a great story because I looked for a job, and they gave me the job in this printing place. And so they said, can you wrap packages? And I said, sure, of course. I never wrapped a package in my life, but I mean, I was that kind of a person. Oh yeah, I could do it, And I went from wrapping a package to working on the cutter, cutting jobs, to actually going into the camera room and becoming a cameraman and a stripper in the printing business. And I just kept growing and growing. And I got so big that, I don't got so big, but I took
Hold on. I gotta stop you because you said you were doing camera work. Now you said about a strip. It was not a stripping place. It was a.
Oh no, not that kind of.
I want you to clarify it to us now. You were working at a printing shop, doing a job. Okay.
Yeah, well, when you lay down the pages for a book or something like this, and then they call that stripping.
Okay.
So I learned how to lay out a book and this like that, and so that gave me the title as a stripper.
Okay, I'm glad to clarify that.
See that technology knocked you right off right there.
Yeah. Well, the title got me threw me off a little bit.
Title was.
So now you're working at this printing business. You have a family.
Yeah.
And you're DJing, obviously. You're still.
Yeah. DJing. Well, see what happened once I thought that I was at the top of what I was doing, then I wanted to get into management in the business. And what happened was that the boss that I was working with, he was a nice guy, man. I mean, he was really, really a good person. But I sat down and had a discussion with him, because I wanted to go into management. And one of the things that he told me is that, you know, he felt that none of his clients were going to sit down at the table with me for me to tell them how to spend their money. So when he told me that, it a light bulb lit up and it says, whoa, it doesn't look like you can get
Too far.
any further in printing because it sounds like it's racist, and so from then on, I kind of like lost interest in the printing, although I still continued because, it was good paying job and this and that. But at night I started DJing and moving more into the music and trying to leave the printing alone because I just felt that I couldn't get to where I wanted to go.
All right, so let that junk go. So we let the printing
Yeah,
go.
we let that
So
go.
now yeah. So now let's fast forward a little bit now. So all of a sudden you're in Philadelphia, you're doing your thing, you're working, you got a family, you're grinding, you're DJing, and then all of a sudden what triggered your movements, because it led you to organize and develop and create an organization and organize the musicians and fight for quote unquote a civil rights for us as Latin musicians. So let's go into that. How did you get into that? So
Well, as I had mentioned a little earlier, I was working on the kind of R&B scene and, meeting the groups and doing some things with them. And then one day in my mind, this thing said, well, what are the musicians in your culture doing? And from then on, it's history because now I wanted to find out where was our Latin music scene in Philadelphia. We had jazz, we had classical, we had R&B, we had rock and roll, but where's Latin? Latin is nowhere on the map. As a matter of fact, that they weren't even using that word. They were using ethnic music. You know what I'm saying? And I'm saying, wait a minute, we
what
got,
year?
we got to get away from this.
What year, Jesse? What year was that about?
Oh, that was back in 1979.
Still in the 70s.
Back in 1979, that's when that.
Still.
Well, yeah, I guess it started in '78 because I was part of that Salsa con Salsa concert at the Civic Center. But it got deeper, after that. It got deeper and I wanted to learn more and I wanted to learn more. And so what I decided to do was go around to find out who the bands were and go around their rehearsals. So I would show up at the band's rehearsal and talk about, the fact of what can happen if we got together, and I would go to the next band's rehearsal until finally, with the help of, I have to mention this guy because he really helped me to bring everybody together at that time, was Ralphie Hernandez from La Contraria.
Ralphie.
And Ralphie held the check there. Out of all the band leaders in Philadelphia, he was the guy that when he said, hey, let's do this. And sure enough, when he said, let's go meet at the church on Monday night, and that was the birth of Amla, believe it or not. And the thrust of that was, hey, let's get together because if we get together, we can change the working conditions. Working conditions were horrible, Pablo.
Okay, hold
Get
on.
in.
Let me stop you there.
Mhm.
So you said that was the beginning of, you said a word, AMLA. So
Yeah.
now for the world to know, we're in Philadelphia here, guys, because understand this globally, salsa back in the 78, 79, 80, salsa was exploding in New York City. We had Celia Cruz, Willie Colon, Ray Barreto, Tito Puente, Mr. Masonave, which we had the incredible experience of interviewing him as well. We did on our last episode. I mean, this was exploding. The Latin tinge already passed, and New York City was exploding with that music. So all of a sudden, here we go, an hour and a half, 2 hours away from New York City, and you're organizing these bands in a church to try to get better wages and get better working conditions. That's almost like That's incredible to me. So, and in doing so, Jesse, you organize this and you use the word, the beginning of AMLA. Can you, AMLA, tell the world what AMLA is, Jesse? Because I was, I taught there for 17, 18 years under you, with you, and like it's a phenomena that occurred here in Philadelphia that really helped a lot of musicians. But tell the world, Jesse, what AMLA is, and then
Well,
just from the
AMLA,
beginning.
became the Asociación de Músicos Latinoamericanos, and English translation, the Latin American Musicians Association. And the reason that it was AMLA was because in our conversations and in our meetings, we discussed the fact that it wasn't just Puerto Ricans that were musicians here in the city of Philadelphia. There were other Latinos, that were musicians that were having the same impact that we had, and they played with us. And so the Asociación de Músicos Latinoamericanos became the title of the organization. Now, it took a while to get that title also because the way that we started, the funding world in Philadelphia looked at us like a union because basically that's how we responded in order to get what we wanted. We boycotted the clubs in Philadelphia until the owners came and sat down at the table and we negotiated better working conditions. I mean, the musicians were playing 5 sets a night, getting $30, and it's at a bar or whatever it is. By the time they they play 5 sets, they just spent all their money in beer or whatever, things like that. So anyway, but then AMLA was formed because I was successful with this gentleman by the name of Justin Finks, which and he was able to put me in connection with someone in Washington that specialized in nonprofit organizations, and we wound up getting our 501c3.
And
So
what year was that, Jesse?
we got our 501c3 in 1982. We formed November the 1st of 1982, and by the end of that year, we were able to get our 501c3.
Wow.
And for those that don't know 501c3, it's nonprofits that are able to go and solicitate money for the things that they're doing. Because, there was a lot of things that I wanted to do with the musicians, but, everything that you do costs money. And how do you do it? And then someone came to me and they said, Jesse, the best thing you do is to become a nonprofit. And then you'll be able to maybe generate some dollars to do some of the things that you want to do with the musicians. Mm-hmm. And so there was a reality. It took a few years before the organization was funded. And what we used to do is just throw dances, and then whatever we make at the dance, we would split it up at the end of the evening. And we went like that for almost 3 years. Mm. And then finally, the first funding organization sent me $500. And so after 3 years, I was like, $500? For after 3 years, I'm going to send this back. And somebody said, don't do that. Don't do that, because that's the beginning of your funding history. So, and it was true. Once I could say that there was a funding organization that was funding me, then others would take a look at and see if they were interested in doing the same.
Okay, so listen. So now you're starting to get funded. I think I came to Philadelphia from Bethlehem to study at Temple. I think I was about 82. I was a sophomore. Well, yeah, in there, sophomore, junior. So I started. I'm not sure when I started working with you, but so you started. But when I came aboard AMLA, I came in as a teacher. So,
yeah, sure.
So obviously your mission statement went from not only organizing the musicians and trying to fight for better wages and conditions, but now it seemed like you started graduating or developing other ideas of, hey, maybe we can educate and because that's when I came in. AMLA was a school. It developed into a
Right.
full-fledged Latin school, music school, Latin school of music, and you know, obviously that's and this is where I kind of got involved a little bit. We were getting organized in the beginning, but like your mission statement developed and grew, not just from, you know.
Yes. And Pablo, when you get an opportunity, get a little closer to your mic, if you can.
Absolutely, I'll
Yes.
bring it a little closer.
And
Uh,
because well, and you're right, Pablo, and we had to take a look at our mission statement and kind of like work on it, and we wound up with one that we felt that could cover a lot of things that we wanted to do, even though some of those things we weren't doing. So it was like to promote the development, dissemination, and understanding of Latin music with a strong emphasis on our youth. And
mm,
so that kind of opened up the door for, the kids in the school and because our thing was, well, how are we going to pass our music on?
right.
I mean, there's no structures, in other words, the kids that have talent in our Latino community, what were they going to do? They
Right.
had nobody to help open up the door. And let me tell you, at one point I had 300 students a semester at AMLA,
Oh, I remember, and also Jesse, it's notable to state that in Philadelphia, the African American community had like the Settlement School of Music. They had a couple other resources
yeah,
where they can study jazz, and for Latino kids in the community in the barrio, we didn't. There nothing existed before
nothing.
AMLA,
No,
so that's how I came aboard as a teacher,
yeah,
while I was at Temple.
exactly. And I wanna, it was great that Temple existed because there were people there like yourself that could come and teach the kids because they were studying music. They were getting their degrees in music. So it kind of like the marriage kind of like worked very, very well. And I was very, very pleased because I knew that the kids were getting the right information, and and I remember schools like the Settlement Music School coming to AMLA because they were trying to see if they could uh, get some of the teachers that we had because we were doing things that they weren't doing,
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Well,
it was,
we had a global perspective. We were coming in from the Afro-Caribbean, roots forever from Brazil to Cuba to Puerto Rico to Santo Domingo and all the traditions of all the Latinos, the Venezolano community. Like we really taught a bunch of different styles of Latin music and genres of Latin music, and so yeah, it was amazing. So Jesse, with that being
but
said.
Pablo, let me tell you, you were responsible for a lot of that.
Well, yeah, but I wanted to, yeah, I did, and I used Damla as a conduit to go to study to go to Cuba, and
Yeah,
every time I went to Cuba a bunch.
but besides that, when you sat there with the students, they learned from you, man. Because everybody can't teach.
Oh, I know,
A lot
I
of
know.
people don't know. A lot of people would love to teach, but they can't teach. They don't have the patience. They don't know what to say. They don't know what to do,
Yeah,
and they can't do it. But you are a traveling professional artist,
hmm,
and still when you're not touring or whatever it is, and that's what you would do at AMLA when you weren't on tour or whatever,
hmm,
you'd come to AMLA and continue,
teaching.
educating our young kids. And I really want to thank you for that
Mm.
because in my heart, that's what I wanted to do. But I couldn't teach them what you taught them,
Hmm.
or the next teacher. I couldn't do that neither because I wasn't qualified for that. So in
Yeah,
my,
but I gotta stop you here though, because
well,
if it weren't for you, we wouldn't, people like myself, people like Claudio Tributi, people like, I mean, it just goes on a list of great teachers that we've had, Elio Villafranca and a whole bunch. We wouldn't have the opportunity had it not been for you to be able to provide that service to our children. You were the maverick, you were the cornerstone in Philadelphia to have the vision to get that nonprofit status and create AMLA and organize So had it not been for you, thousands and thousands of children in Philadelphia would not have been educated. And I am one of those children because through AMLA, I used AMLA not only as a place to teach, but it was also a conduit for me to continue to further my education, to go to Cuba. I've been to Cuba 7, 8 times because of being able to teach at AMLA, and AMLA was a conduit, and I was able to get funding from many times from from different sources. So AMLA was responsible for a whole movement of education and awareness and it was because of your genius and your foresight, and I'm totally humbled to be here with you as always. So that's why I'm having so much fun. I'm talking to you, and Sabes que is all about educating people. It means you know what. We have an amazing man here, Mr. Jesse Bermudez, who's a pillar in Philadelphia, and I came through that as a result of knowing you. Have been able to develop my career, my education, my studies in folk music in Cuba and Puerto Rico and Brazil, everywhere, and use it in popular music. So I thank you as well. And but anyway,
You
but
know, well, you know what, Pablo, as you articulate what you were saying about AMLA, I think about the fact that, one of the thoughts that was placed in my mind and is still in my mind, and that is that, you know, uh, you can use music for community development. And a perfect example of that was when in the 80s, our schools were full of Puerto Rican kids, and none of the teachers spoke Spanish or understood the culture. And then we created that program, the Roots of Puerto Rican Music,
right,
went into those schools, and all of a sudden, there was history now. The teachers listened to us carefully. The students loved it because, all of a sudden we were talking about them and their culture,
right,
and even parochial schools.
right,
The experience that we would have then, and the teachers wouldn't know this, but at the end of the show, we would say, okay, now it's the teacher's turn. Well, who were the teachers? They were nuns. So all of a sudden, the nun is playing the maraca and walking around, and the students saw a different side of that nun, they saw a different side of themselves too, that they wouldn't have even done that if they weren't, motivated by the programs that we brought into the schools. But
right.
but Pablo, enough about me.
Oh wait, hold on, but listen, Jesse, I wanted to also mention that program that you work with. It was called the Roots of Puerto Rican Music. I think I co-wrote it a little bit, but also there was an amazing musician I wanted to mention by the name of Lenny Prieto,
Of
who,
course.
who who was a Temple student at the time, and he helped write that as well. The Roots of Puerto Rican Music. I had a little influence in it, but Lenny went on to graduate with a master's and stuff from
Yeah.
Temple, and also to perform with the great El Gran Combo. So he's in Puerto Rico, killing it, and he was a part of AMLA as well. We also have a brother, Claudio Triputi. I mentioned, from I think Venezuela. He was from Argentina, but he resides in Venezuela now.
He's
But
Argentina and is married to Yarida, which is from Venezuela.
right. And but there's so many amazing people that came through. But I
But
also wanted to mention, Jesse, not to cut you off, brother,
mhm,
but as a result of what you did, you were also able to bridge the gap between New York musicians and Philadelphia musicians by way of AMLA, by way of bringing them in to do amazing workshops and clinics and concerts. And can you talk a little bit about that? Because you brought so many amazing and through the Painted Bride Art Center and your affiliation with Philadelphia community. Because AMLA started working and collaborating with a bunch of different organization nonprofits in Philadelphia because of your relationships with them, because of your great personality. You were able to develop AMLA and put us in places where we wouldn't have been able to perform, and then bring brothers from New York and to come in and help us and help develop our region. So talk a little bit about that, Jesse, because that's very important to me.
when you mentioned that, a little sidebar thing here, when you said about bringing music everywhere, I remember having a trio playing music in front of a mummy at the museum. But it was that kind of thing. We our mission was to get our music out there everywhere that we could get it, and expose the people to it, and they enjoyed it. And the fact of the matter about the artists, the reason that all those artists was around there was because guess what? I always felt that our kids needed to be surrounded by the best. If you're surrounded by the best, then you're going to walk out of that school or whatever that is, and you're going to, and nobody's teaching you the wrong thing. That's why you guys went to Cuba and all of that. And when you came back and taught a rhythm, it was the real thing, man. It wasn't like something that somebody in the street said, oh, hey, man, play this. It wasn't like that. No. It wasn't like that. And I always felt that our kids deserved the best. And so when those artists came from the outside, I mean, the other day I was just thinking about Yomo Toro, the greatest cuatro player in the world. And he would come to AMLA and do workshops. He was such a humble guy, and, Larry Harlow and you name it. And well, you've experienced it all, and you played with a lot of these people too, like the Gonzalez brothers, Miguel Conjunto Libre and all, and they were great, and I learned a lot from them. Not a musician, but I learned so much by being around these guys. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And I remember Andy Gonzalez bringing old recordings, because this is how these guys learned. They sat there and listened to recordings and then talked about it, and then talked about how they can take whatever they heard to another level, which is what you do, Pablo. You listen to things and then you try to take them to another level. You try to incorporate them. You try to lock them in and say, oh, you thought that this didn't go with this? Check this out. Watch how I do this. Watch how I bring it to where it needs to be. So you got me talking.
No, but listen, I have a funny story about that, because we talked about I did have a chance to work with Conjunto Libre for about 4.5 years, and I have a funny story about one night being in the hotel, and my roommate that weekend, whatever it was Andy, and I remember just staying up till 3-4 in the morning after the concert, and Andy just playing music from Spain and from Argentina, right. And I'm like, yo, Andy, I'm like tired, yo. We got a 7 o'clock lobby call, and he's like, yo, man, but you got to listen to this, and it's like, and this is like, I mean, for me, it was an amazing learning experience. But these brothers, the Gonzalez brothers and Manny Oquendo, I mean, for me, it was I just an eye-opening experience as the how hard these guys worked and the traditions, and man, I learned so much. It was a great period in my life to work with those cats. And,
well, you know what, Pablo, we're having fun talking, and we're gonna keep talking, but we gotta take a break. So we're gonna take a little break, and then we'll be back, because guess what? Now you got me reminiscing.
We're in trouble now.
Yeah.
Let's take a break for the cause. You're listening to Sabes Que, y'all.
Yeah, that's what y'all listening to, Sabes Que. Welcome to Sabes Que. I'm your host, Jessie Bermudez, and my co-host is Pablo Baptista. And we're going to continue our conversation about actually one another. Right. I'm going to talk about him and he's going to talk about me, but only because of the accomplishments that we have had in our world of Latin music here in the city of Philadelphia, and in his case, all over the country, international. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit, Pablo, because you keep saying what I've been doing and this and that, but the fact of the matter is that you are the only person I know that plays in everybody's genre. And guess what? You just don't play in that genre. You play with nothing but the best. And that's not an easy accomplishment. Some folks just play salsa, some folks play jazz, some folks don't, but you do R&B, rock, gospel, you name it and you do it, and it's like, yo, you know, I don't know. I don't know what to say, but you need to talk a little bit about what made you kind of like say, hey, I'm going to learn it all and I'm going to be good at it all.
Ooh, well, thank you for all of that. Wow. How much do I owe you? I'll pay you later. No,
But
actually,
let's get
actually,
close to your mic because I want the people to make sure that
yeah. Well, I mean,
you got to say, man, because
well, Jesse, first of all, I come from Puerto Rican parents who were immigrants. They came over to Bethlehem. They moved from Puerto Rico to work in Bethlehem. My dad basically worked in the coal mines at the Bethlehem Steel, and then my mom was a laborer at a factory. And they met here in Bethlehem, and then they went back to Puerto Rico, got married, and moved back to Bethlehem and created the family in the 50s. And I have three older sisters who I love dearly. We have a very close knit family, and but I grew up listening to everything. Like I grew up listening to Earth, Wind and Fire, War, Mandrill, Kool and the Gang, Ohio Players, Tito Puente, Celia Cruz, Eddie Palmieri, Fania All Stars, Típica 73. Then I got into real heavy jazz and started getting to Weather Report, and then when I went to high school, I got into rock music and started listening to like all these different Boston and all these different great music. The Allman Brothers and Santana was a huge influence, and I mean, I basically started studying all these different styles. But my root was always Latin music, Afro-Cuban, Afro-Puerto Rican music, and so I began studying at the age of 9 with a man by the name of Miguel Candia who moved from Puerto Rico. He used to play with Puente in Puerto Rico, and he was a friend of Giovanni Hidalgo's father, and so they were friends. So I studied with him in Bethlehem. My dad, they worked at the Bethlehem Steel, and they became friends. And my dad told him, "Hey, my son wants to play." He gave me a lesson or two, and the rest is history. I played all throughout high school. I came to Temple University. I graduated in 1985 with a degree in pre-law because I wanted to have something to fall back on. And then, but immediately I had been studying so hard and working so hard. I connected with Grover Washington Jr. right before I graduated from Temple, and then eventually it landed. I gave him he got a demo tape of mine, and he dug it. He really liked it. He called me for a recording session, and that recording session was Gene Carn, "Closer Than Close," and that was an R&B hit. Meanwhile, I was in Philly playing with like the Philly Stars and little salsa groups around Philly, and I had already been met you, and I had been playing, teaching at AMLA, and so I had been touring with Grover and teaching at AMLA, and then doing sessions in Philly. I started doing more recording sessions and more, and it led me from one thing to another, and it just kept me going from one artist to another and to current day, and that was it started back in 1985.
well, you know what, Pablo? I want you to mention some of these artists because you can say, well, I played with this artist and I name them so that the people know who you played with because to play with them, you have to be a high caliber musician.
Well, let me start by like, okay, so if we're gonna talk about gospel music, I played and toured and recorded with Kirk Franklin. If we talk about contemporary jazz, I worked with Grover Washington for 17 years and recorded with him. I have Grammy Awards in four different categories: contemporary jazz, pop, and I forgot the other one, but anyway, there's three or four. Anyway, there's gospel, there's jazz, there's Latin. I spent those years with Manny and Manny Oquendo and Conjunto Libre. I had a chance to work with Eddie Palmieri a little bit. I worked with Jimmy Bosch on the salsa thing, but it just goes on. I had a chance to tour with Jill Scott. I've had a chance to tour with Teddy Pendergrass, Phyllis Hyman. I spent years with Patti LaBelle. I toured with Patti. She's so sweet. I love Patti. Um, uh, Gosh, and then I spent many years with with Grover until his passing. I worked with him until he passed, and then and then I went on tour from and worked and recorded with Alicia Keys for many years, for about 13 years. I love Alicia; she's awesome, and now I'm up to date. I have one album under my belt, Jesse. I recorded back in the day. I'm currently doing my next album, which is turning out to be awesome, and it's actually the theme of Sabes that we're using a little bit of our intro, and um, and then I'm also working with an amazing young artist who is just she's dominating right now. Her name, the artist's name is Her, and she we're nominated. I recorded with her, and we were nominated for a Golden Globe for a song that was the title track for this movie called Judas the Messiah, and the soundtrack got picked up, and I Will Fight for You. It's her, and so that song got nominated for a Golden Globe, but we didn't win. But we a nomination for me is like a win. But her is also nominated for a bunch of Grammys this year, and I'm super excited. We did a song called "I Can't Breathe," and I recorded on, and it's up for some awards. And she's an amazing young artist. The world's going to be really excited to see. She's just multi instrumentalist. She's a sweet person, and I can't wait to do more work with her. And so up to date, that's where I'm at, Jesse. I'm you know,
Yeah, that's
30,
a whole lot.
32 years in the game, and I'm praying to continue on and disseminating. And my album is Latin jazz. I go back to the roots, Afro-Cuban, Afro-Puerto Rican roots. This album's gonna be really dope. I'm working with Ricky Gonzalez and my band. I got a bunch of great artists, guest artists like Conrad Herwig and oh my goodness, it goes on. Ricky Gonzalez, Bakiti Kumalo, Nestor Torres is on this album. Anyway, there's a bunch of cats that are on it, so I want everyone to stay tuned from when my record comes out. It's going to be really cool. But so that's where I'm at, Jess.
Well, it's nothing like you putting your stuff out there, right? I mean, you play with everybody and everything, and you get all of the goodies that come with it per se. But I guess when it's your thing, and you up front, that means a whole lot. And I know it means a whole lot to you. But I mean, who is more deserving than you? I mean, it's this. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I've been around you too long, man.
Listen, but let me say this: every man has a village, or every child has a village around them, and I've had a village around me. You were always a part of that village. My family, my mother, my beautiful wife, my children. I have two children that are beautiful. And also there were people that have been supporting me for years that I have to talk about real quickly. And one company is Latin Percussion LP. I've been endorsing them since 1985. They've been awesome to me. They've provided me with all my instruments. Another company is Remo. They're the heads that I use on my drums, and there's another company, ProMark, that I use their sticks. My cymbals are Sabian. So all these people have combined and come to my rescue to help me in my endeavor to try to become the best version of Pablo Baptista I can be. I never had the approach of, I never said to anybody or myself that I want to be the best in the world. I always just said I wanted to be the best that I can be, and I want to continue working hard. And until this day, I work hard. Every day I wake up, I'm practicing studying, and I'm really excited about presenting my own band because I can play 4 or 6 congas, and I can, the arrangements are really crazy and they're fun to play. In fact, I have shows coming up at South in case anyone's interested coming up. So, yeah, Jesse, I'm very grateful and humbled by my life. God's been good to me. I've worked really hard. I continue to work very hard since a little boy, and but I couldn't have done it without you and the village behind me. And Philadelphia has been a really great place for me to be. And all these companies that I mentioned were amazing, Latin Percussion, etc. And but I'm grateful, and I'm really happy to be co-hosting this Sabes Que with you, because we just talked to the incredible Hector Masonabe and talked about his history, and we just talked about your history and a little bit of mine. but the world has so many other great people that we're gonna be able to try to get to
Yeah.
and talk about.
No question, Pablo. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. Our show is really starting, and it's going to be the kind of show where you're going to hear about people that were behind the scenes that you didn't know that they were behind the scenes, and what their contributions were. And you're also going to begin to hear some of our Philadelphia local musicians that have been in their community for 30, 40 years entertaining the people. And they're they just deserve. And of course, Pablo, I've been a
Yeah.
Philly guy all along, and I've always admired the music and the artists. And through this show, we're going to give an opportunity to hear some of these musicians who have a history. They can tell you when they started in 1960 or 1970 what was happening in Philadelphia, and what was the makeup of the bands. You know what I'm saying? They didn't have big bands; they had smaller conjuntos, and there's some great stories. And I think that Sabes, along with featuring some of the people that have really been very successful in the Latin music scene and the Latin jazz scene, for that matter, will be part of the Sabes program. And I'm glad that you're with me, Pablo, because there's times where there's salsa, and there's times where there's Latin jazz, and there's times but all the genres, and most of the people, and I think that will make for some good programs. And I hope that we're able to disseminate this information out there, and that there's a listening audience that really may be interested in knowing about our plight, our music, and what's going on with it. And as you know, Pablo, we've lost so many of our great artists.
Yes.
From Celia to Tito Puente to Cano Estermero, just now Johnny Pacheco. I mean, Tito Rojas. I mean, on Johnny. Jerry Gonzalez
Yes.
and his brother Andy.
Andy,
I mean,
Manny.
these guys were legends. They created the world of Latin jazz. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
It's like, so much, and there's so much history. And as long as I'm alive, I'm going to throw the history out there. You know what I'm saying? Try the best that I can, whatever I know. And I'm not a historian. I'm not a musicologist. I'm just a guy who's interested in letting people know that Latin music exists. Musicians like yourself exist that need to be recognized for your contribution to the music. And the fact of the matter is, like I started when I mentioned you, is how many people do you know that can play in everybody's genre at the top, not at the bottom of the genre, but at the top of the genre. So, hey, look, I am glad that you decided that you would join me on Sabes, did you know? Because, we have compliments. I mean, you're the younger guy doing the thing out there. I'm the older guy trying to figure out how I can talk about what happened 50 years ago. You know what I'm saying? But
Hey, hey, Jesse, I'm not the younger guy anymore. I passed that stage,
you still got hair.
but listen, I am grateful and I'm humbled by our friendship and our relationship that's lasted well over 30 years. And there's so many great musicians in Philadelphia that we owe homage to, and there's not enough time to do so. But you've been a beacon of light for all of us musicians in Philadelphia, us Latin brothers, and we're very grateful. I'm humbled to be here with you. I'm excited for what the future brings, so that we can continue to shine a light on greatness in Philadelphia, greatness in Latin music, and let the beat go on. I love you, brother.
Yeah, well, I love you too, man. And guess what? Not only Philly guys, but what about the guys in Camden? What about the Delaware Valley? All these, and we know all these musicians. We've worked with all of them at some point or another, and they need to be recognized and listen to some of their stories. you know, and we all have stories, but they're all different and they're all interesting. And part of the story is for you and I to survive and continue to work on Sabes and making it one of the best informative music programs that we can based on what we have around us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jesse. It's a pleasure. We'll see you on the next episode of Sabes que.